August 13th, 2025 Transportation Commission meeting to order. Ariana, if you could please read the instructions.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who are registered to speak. The name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ariana. Aiden, if you could call the roll, please.
Sure. William Okovich. Sean O'Brien.
Present.
Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
I am here.
Barbara Harrington McKinney. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Pepe Barros.
Here.
Harold Clemes.
Here.
Kaylee Jameson.
Here.
Lynn Olson.
Present.
And then Denise Jess. Looks like she's here.
Said she was going to be late.
Looks like she just logged in.
I'm here.
Here she is. Wow, that wasn't very late.
And then Chris McCahill and Bill Bremer are excused.
So Kaylee and Lynn, with the absences we have, you are both able to make motions and vote this evening. So everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from the last meeting. Harold.
I move approval of the minutes.
There's a motion. Robbie?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no. Abstain? Please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Hey, next. I see that you distributed a little bit before the meeting started, Aiden, some public comments under item number 1. Do we have anybody registered to speak under item 1? Aiden? Aiden, can you hear me?
Hey, Ann. Sorry, my internet just cut out. Can you hear me?
Do we have anybody registered to speak under item 1?
We do not, no.
Okay. Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing none. Then we have one item proposed for the consent agenda. Item number 2, repealing and recreating subsection 12.1335(2) of the Madison General Ordinances to update the snow emergency zone description. Do we have anybody registered to speak on item 2?
We do not, nope.
Okay, anybody wish to separate it? Harold, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I wish to separate it very quickly.
Okay. All right, then we'll just go to Harold's questions, perhaps. And hopefully somebody from staff is here to answer them.
Yeah, this is something I would have emailed staff had I looked at it before. The only thing I noticed in the language of the ordinance, there is a reference to the, whatever we call it now in the new word, the snow emergency zone map, and that URL points to the old website before the city made the switch to the new website. So the link still works, but it's a redirect to the new website. So while we're updating ordinances, I guess maybe staff can consider updating that link to the snow emergency website on the new website. That's all I want to say.
Oh, yeah, great point. Thanks. I didn't click on that. Anybody from staff here want to comment on that? Anybody? Eric?
I guess I can make a note of that and follow up with legislative staff.
Okay, thanks, Eric. All right, any other comments on item 2? If not, we would need a motion to approve or actually recommend to the council. Harold?
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Eric, your hand is still up. Was it up for anything? Okay. Is there a second to Harold's motion? Pepe?
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote, and just noting that issue with the link that Harold pointed out. Thanks for that, and staff will look into that. Alder O'Brien.
I just really quickly want to note that Alder Okovich is in the attendees side, and I think should probably be shifted over to the panelist side.
Thank you very much. Could you please move? He shows as Will Okovich in the attendees. Could you please move him to the panelists? Thanks very much. Okay. Right. So we'll check him off. I always need to keep track because I need to know how many votes we need to pass a motion. Okay, thanks everybody. So next, we have the Metro Transit Annual Financial Statement Audit Report, and Jody Dobson is here from Baker Tilly to make a presentation this evening. And let's see, we have I thought Wayne Block was supposed to be here to help answer any questions, but I don't see him in the attendees. Well, let's check the attendees to see. I don't see him there. I don't know. Perhaps he didn't get a Zoom invitation. Well, Jody, welcome. Why don't you go ahead?
I will go ahead and hopefully be able to answer questions. Let's see if I want to.
I just, for those of you who may not know, Wayne was worked for Metro Transit as a finance director for a number of years, and he came back in a consulting role. So he has been assisting them and was hoping to be here this evening to help if there were any questions about maybe what he had been working on for Metro. But Jody, I'm sure you're going to be able to answer any of our questions. So please go ahead.
Well, thank you. First, I want to confirm, can you see the PowerPoint presentation that I shared?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So what I want to do this evening is we've completed the annual audit for 2024 is just walk through a brief overview of the process, our required communications, and then answer any questions you might have on the documents that were provided. So my name is Jody Dobson, for anyone who I have not met before. I'm the principal who oversees the transit audit. I have been working on your audit for, I'm going to say roughly 20 years. I've kind of lost track over time, but it's been a number of years. And we actually, Baker Tilly audits the entire city of Madison, but we've got a couple different teams that focus in different areas. So I happen to work with transit as well as the water utility. We have a director named Sarah Slaughter who performed our concurring or our second review. That really is just a role that takes a cold read on the financial statements before they're finalized. So she's not involved in the weeds of the audit at all, but that gives her the ability to go through, read the statements, and identify anything where maybe it isn't said as clearly, or there might be contradictions or things that just need to be cleaned up that those in the weeds tend to miss. And then Megan Cahill is the senior manager who oversees the day-to-day operations of the audit. So our audit process really starts with looking at your internal processes for financial information. What are the controls in each cycle of processing disbursements or fair revenues and grant revenues, payroll, etc. And as we walk through each of these areas, we're looking to see how is the information gathered, what reports are available, what are the processes, so that we can ultimately determine how do we want to test the information. Some things we will confirm with outside parties, trace to supporting documentation. In some instances, we'll walk through a sample of transactions to look at the process and the controls. So it's a number of different things that we may do, ultimately with the goal that we need to obtain enough evidence to issue our audit opinion. Our opinion is on the financial statements, not on the internal controls. But if there's anything that comes to our attention during this process, we report that citywide in another document that talks about internal controls. And I will say in there, we noted that we assist with the preparation of the financial statements. And this year there was a restatement in the transit financial statements for a couple of items from 2023 that had more clarity on the information in 2024 and needed to be corrected. So ultimately, after all of that process, the testing and those adjustments, the financial statements received what we call a clean or an unmodified opinion. And that says that the final financial statements are a fair presentation in all material respects of the financial position and the results of operations for transit for the year. Those financial statements are the responsibility of management. With some of the turnover that occurred in the spring of 2025, as you noted, Wayne Black came back and assisted with both preparing some of the annual reconciliations and pulling support for us during the audit, and then also assisted with the preparation of those financial statements and getting all of that information together. And then we provided some assistance in the finalization of that as well. We always like to note that the management discussion and analysis, which is at the beginning of the financial statement document, and I'm just going to check, it's pages 4 through 17. This is drafted by management to really be a nice plain English discussion of what are the financial results, what were the reasons for any changes, and where does transit sit at year end. The rest of the document can get into a lot of accounting details, and so, you've got someone that wants to see what's going on but doesn't maybe want to get into all 60 some pages, that's a good section to point them to. And then also like to note that because the transit operations receive significant state and federal funding, we do perform single audit tests on those grants as part of the city's citywide single audit. And there were no compliance issues related to transit testing this year. So that's very positive. So a couple financial highlights here to point out. Here we have a 5-year trend of the operating revenues. And what we can see is over the last 5 years, 2020 through 2022, pretty flat. And the next slide will actually look at operating expenses over the same period. And you'll see that those are the same, pretty flat for those years. There's some odd things going on in the world there that we weren't seeing our normal trends. But 2023, 2024, both revenues and expenses have been increasing with operations and ridership. As we looked there, 2020 and 2023 had a much larger orange section, which is the federal subsidy. That was really in relation to some of the COVID era funding that was received and applied in 2020 And then the remainder of that was left and hadn't been spent was used in 2023. And the way that was used was to, in both of those years, be able to reduce what's needed from the local municipalities, the city and the other partners. So the black section was decreased in those 2 years. And then in 2024, we see things return a little bit more to normal, that the federal grants were back to their normal section or allotment, and therefore the local share had to increase accordingly. So again, looking at the expenses, we see a very similar trend here, and that really is because so much of the revenue streams are reimbursement grants, so they are in line with the expenses that are incurred. And then also seeing that the largest single expense related to the transit operations is the green bar, the salaries and benefits. And I'll tell you that is very consistent with every other transit organization I work with. It is a very labor-intensive operation. Also a very capital-intensive operation, and you've got the capital grants that come into play on that. As far as required communications, there's a lot more detail in the written document that's prepared citywide, but a couple items here I want to highlight is there is other information in the financial statements, things like the management discussion and analysis or some pension schedules at the back that show 10 years worth of information. Those we don't provide an opinion on, but we do read to make sure that they're consistent with the financial statements. And then if there's supplementary schedules that are more detailed than the basic financial statements, those typically we're making sure again that they're consistent and they're supported by the financial records. The audit really went, I'll say, as much according to normal plan as could possibly be with the staffing changes, and was able to meet all of the final deadlines and timelines, both for individual and citywide reporting. There was one new accounting policy in 2024. GASB had a new standard related to compensated absences. The goal here from GASB's perspective was to make sure that they rewrote the standard a bit more broadly and conceptual rather than specific to sick leave, because they're seeing governments offering a variety of types of benefits and wanting to make sure that no matter what types of benefits were being offered, they were being accrued and accounted for similarly. What it did for your benefits is just took a new look at what is more likely than not to be paid out or used in some fashion and make sure that the liability was accommodating for that. It was not a significant change in the dollar balance at all, but just a new way to look at it. No difficulties. I'll say there were no audit adjustments identified as part of the audit process. The adjustments that were identified that were adjustments to restate the prior year, those correction of errors, were identified by management through their year-end processes. And then we worked with management to make sure that they were being reported in accordance with the standards, because there was, within the last 2 years, some new guidance on how those are presented in the statements. And so we made sure that was all consistent. Those two areas, one was related to some assets that had been retired and not taken off the books, and they were primarily fully depreciated, so not a large impact there. And then the other one was related to how the local revenue in 2023 was adjusted for that additional federal revenue and making sure that there was nothing hanging over there for amounts expected that wouldn't be need to pay by those other partners. Otherwise, a lot of the things that we would be required to report if they occurred, such as consultations, disagreements, compliance issues or concerns, there's nothing there to report. So with that, I do want to say thank you to staff and, Wayne stepping in as a consultant and getting us the information we needed. It was very much appreciated that they answered all the follow-up questions and as quickly as they could. And we really do enjoy working with the team there. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on the financial statements or about the audit.
Thanks very much, Jody. Comments or questions for Jody? Anybody have any comments or questions for Jody? I just want to clarify and point out that you mentioned that the material misstatements were actually identified by management and then corrected, but I also just want to re-emphasize that you said that did not impact your clean, unqualified opinion.
That's correct.
Yeah. And speaking as a retired credit officer from a bank, that's, the best you can get. So,
Yes.
other comments or questions for Jody? We appreciate your oversight and the great deal of experience that you bring to this audit. That's working with governmental organizations is a specialty and very, very much appreciated. We do need a motion to accept the report. Alder O'Brien.
I'll make the motion.
Alder Martinez Rutherford.
I will second.
Okay. Did you wish to speak to your motion at all, Alder O'Brien? No? Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion's carried unanimously. And thanks again, Jody, very much for coming. Great to see you. Okay. So next we have item number 4 on traffic safety concerns on Williamson Street. And I'm assuming we have people registered to speak on that. Is that correct, Aiden?
That's correct. Yep. We have a few.
Okay. So how we'll handle this is that we'll hear from staff with a presentation, and then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll have comments and discussion. So Tom, go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone.
Excuse me a second. Harold has his hand up.
Yeah, Chair. One question. I saw the emails that were distributed, and they sounded like they were for this item, but I guess
Yes.
they were submitted under item 1. Did I misunderstand that?
So what happened? I didn't catch that. Aiden, maybe you can clarify, but while you were gone, Harold, at one of the meetings, we got a number of comments from staff, from the public on this particular topic, which caused us to put it on the agenda. And those were saved under item 1. The first time around from the June 25th meeting, I think. So Aiden, you have those comments saved under this item 4, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. There's a hyperlink to that for the previously submitted comments.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification. And sorry for
Sure.
misunderstanding that.
So it wasn't really discussed at that meeting. We just acknowledged that we received them. And then under future agenda topics, we talked about putting it on the agenda for actual opportunity to discuss. Okay, great clarification. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Tom Moore with Traffic Engineering. And the presentation I'm about to give, I gave basically the same presentation to the Marquette Neighborhood Association earlier this year. And this was in response to the latest crash into a building on Williamson Street. So the presentation was more geared toward that. But then later on, towards the end of the presentation, we'll get into more about the peak hour lane removal. So just a little background on that. So this is just kind of the overview of what I'll go through with the presentation. So starting with the crash history and focusing on the building crashes that have taken place. This is an overall map showing the location of those crashes, kind of between Brearley and Thornton. And I'll get into each one of these. I think it's important to go through each one to look for any sort of pattern that's happening, and make sure we're all aware of what's going on. So this is in chronological order, starting with the latest or the oldest crash that kind of within this recent period. So this is 2012. This crash was at Rogers. It was a drunk driver fleeing police early in the morning on a weekday, crashed into a building. I'm not sure if there was an injury on this one. Sorry about that, but next crash was August of 2016 at Ingersoll. So this is Mother Fools. This was a drunk driver, I believe in the early morning, coming off of Ingersoll and hitting the vehicle on Willie Street. This crash was 2017. One injury involved a motorcycle. This is kind of borderline crash into a building, but it was, I think the motorcycle did strike the building. And I think this one was on the block outside of the Willie Street Co-op, yeah. May of 2018 was a crash into Ha Long Bay restaurant. This was a medical episode, so not sure exactly what that means, but I think the driver suffered some sort of episode that caused them to lose consciousness, veer off the road. August of 2020, this crash again was at the Ingersoll intersection. The crash occurred between two vehicles, sideswiped at the intersection that then went off the road on the north side. No injuries. Next crash was actually just same month. So this is August 3rd, and now this is August 31st in 2020. This is at Few Street. Again, no injuries, but this was speeding, estimated 65 miles per hour. I think they collided in the intersection and again drove off, and this one struck the garage door at the fire station. This is a year later, August 2021, was a crash into the Change Boutique at the Baldwin Street intersection. I think this happened at 4:21 a.m. No injuries. I think this one was a little bit unclear exactly what happened that caused the driver to go off. Said he tried to swerve to avoid possibly hitting someone else. But this one got a lot of attention. Then in June of 2022, this was a midday, 11 a.m. I think this was another possible medical event. I think this was another one where there weren't exactly sure what the reason for the crash was. And the latest one was May of this year, 5:22 p.m. Driver again crashed into Mother Fool's Coffee House. Involved a westbound left turn with an eastbound through. So this one was during the afternoon weekday rush hour. So again, this is that map showing the distribution of those crashes. So the only common location was the Ingersoll Street intersection. Otherwise, different reasons for the crashes, different locations, different times of day. It's just hard, other than the common denominator of Williamson Street, there wasn't much common to all the crashes. Just not much of a pattern that you could point your finger at and say, this is the reason why this is happening. I just have some general crash history background for Williamson Street. So here's a distribution. This is 2020, January 2020 through 2024. So 122 total crashes. That yellow 26%, those are injury crashes. The blue 74% is property damage only. The little circle graph on the right is the day of the week. So 122 on Williamson Street. And compared to East Washington Avenue, there were 211 on East Washington Avenue. Just kind of providing some comparison here. I don't think there's anything major that stands out. East Washington Avenue has higher volume. You're expected to be more crashes. But the comparison that is probably a little bit more interesting is Monroe Street. Probably the most comparable street to Williamson Street that I could think of. They both have residential, commercial. They both have peak hour traffic lanes. So inbound toward the Capitol in the morning, there's a peak hour lane, and outbound away in the afternoon. But quite a bit fewer crashes on Monroe Street compared to Williamson Street. Remember, 122 on Williamson Street during this period, only 46 on Monroe Street. So trying to think of the reasons why there would be that discrepancy. And I think we'll get back to that, but collision types. So this is back to Williamson Street collision types. Rear end was the top with 33. Crashes into parked vehicles, there were 32 of those. A right angle crash, that just means any sort of right angle. It could be someone going through on Williamson Street strikes someone going through on a side street, something like that. So here's the distribution by time of day. So the morning peak and the afternoon peak are noted there. Again, the yellow is injury crashes and blue is property damage only crashes. Kind of what we would expect to see. The most crashes occurring during the time of day with the most traffic. These are the building crashes by time of day and date. So starting from the left side, 2016, and going to the right, present day, with the peak hours shaded. So what this is showing is that the only crash during peak hours that went into a building during this time period was the latest crash in May into Mother Fools. So that's just something that's noteworthy, I thought. This table is a comparison of the crashes that we have seen on Williamson Street compared to the Highway Safety Manual's prediction of how many crashes there would be based on a national average. And so this is just based on the volume on the streets, the type of traffic control, the geometry of the intersection. So, and this is just looking at the intersections. So the column in red is what the HSM would predict the number of crashes per year at that intersection. The column just to the left of that is the actual crashes that have been observed over this time period. in crashes per year. So each one of these intersections is below what would be predicted. So I just wanted to provide that in context. It's based off a national average, so just to show that there's nothing that is really standing out as like an egregious intersection. Traffic volumes. So this is going back to 1983. Williamson Street has been pretty consistent. There was that jump up in kind of the early 2000s. That was, I think that was due to the East Washington Avenue reconstruction. So anytime East Washington Avenue is affected, traffic moves to Williamson Street. But otherwise, it's been pretty level between that 15,000 and 20,000. This only goes to 2017. I do have some more recent data. So this is on the block between Ingersoll and Few. You can see how traffic kind of built up to 2019, dropped down for COVID, and then has come back since then. This is a camera view from just a few minutes ago. The camera is at the John Nolan, Blair, Wilson, Williamson Street intersection. This is looking west down John Nolan Drive towards Monona Terrace. And what this is showing is that right turn, the northbound right turn lane to Williamson Street is at capacity on pretty much every weekday afternoon rush hour. So when you're looking at John Nolan Drive and the congestion and how it operates, there are 2 through lanes which are basically at capacity, but it really more operates as 3 lanes because of that additional lane that goes to Williamson Street. So right now, Williamson Street is pretty much taking as much traffic as possible in the afternoon from John Nolan Drive. It cannot take any more because of this metering that's going on here at John Nolan Drive. It could take more from Wilson Street, but it's maxed out here from John Nolan Drive. And that's kind of how this intersection operates today. If we were to remove any lane here, it would have a big effect on the capacity of this intersection. So I just wanted to point that out. This is just looking further down. It regularly backs up that right turn lane to Williamson Street to the Monona Terrace Tunnel pretty much every weekday afternoon. Wanted to point out the John Nolan Drive reconstruction that starts this fall. So that is from Broome Street down to Lakeside. That will take place from this fall 2025 to about midsummer 2027. And then John Nolan Drive will move to subsequent phases further to the south through 2029. So there will be a diversion off John Nolan Drive during that time. During that time, John Nolan Drive will be down to 1 lane in each direction. So it'll be roughly half the capacity that it is today. So we have to keep that in mind when looking at future volumes and how that spreads out. We are assuming that is going to push more traffic to the isthmus. So commuters that would now use John Nolan Drive to get to the Beltline are, at least a portion of them are going to be coming in on the isthmus and going out that way. This is just a Google Maps that shows the different times. That 17 minutes that is shown right there, that's the best or the quickest way to get kind of downtown from a portion of the east side is going to be much higher than 17 minutes during the peak hours. So the fastest route is going to be the isthmus. A little bit on traffic speeds. We have some older speeds here. This was from our old neighborhood traffic management program where we really kept track of speeds for ranking projects. So this table ranks streets by their number of vehicles over 40 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. I think Williamson Street, those numbers might be a little bit low based on recent counts. I think it's probably a little bit higher than that, but kind of still below where Monroe Street is, and some of the really high speed streets, which isn't surprising because I think although speeds are generally high on Williamson Street, the volume can kind of keep the speeds lower than the really, really high speeds throughout the day. So this is kind of what we would expect to see for Williamson Street. So street layout and geometry, I just wanted to compare Williamson Street to Monroe Street. Kind of the assumption is that there are more four-legged intersections on Williamson Street compared to Monroe Street. There's just more cross traffic. Monroe Street has more T intersections, fewer or less cross traffic. The yellow is indicating, I think, locations. I'm not trying to remember exactly what that indicates, but I think it's the places where it might be places where buildings are really close, but I think that is what it's trying to show here. So where it's not highlighted, the buildings are further offset from the street. Where it is highlighted, the buildings are kind of right on the lot line. So there's quite a bit of a difference between Monroe and Williamson Street in that aspect. So what can we do about the building crashes? Traffic calming curb changes or speed humps. We don't have much of an option for that. The speed humps, I know we've gone over this at Transportation Commission over the years, but we don't put speed humps on bus routes. We don't put them on major emergency vehicle routes. There's the fire station number 3 on Williamson Street, so that would be something that we wouldn't do for a street like that. Curb changes, if there was a lane reduction, there might be a little bit of an opportunity for that, but we still have to accommodate turning vehicles. And if anyone is familiar with Baldwin Street, where buses make the right turn from Baldwin onto Williamson Street, bus pretty much uses all the available space that's out there right now. So there's not a lot of opportunity, even if we were down to one lane in each direction, to bump out the curbs, just because we still have to accommodate turning vehicles. Lighting improvements, I think, the city has recently done an LED upgrade to the street lights. There might be more in locations that we could do, but it would probably be minimal. Traffic signal improvements, we could always look at better visibility of the traffic signal heads. We can look at additional left turn phases. So for example, at Baldwin, there's the westbound left turn phase, the green arrow that gives them a protected left turn. We could look at that in other intersections. Lane reduction, we'll get into that more. Police enforcement is always something we have to consider. And then physical barriers at intersections. So this is kind of directly looking at the building crashes. So look into those a little bit more. These are the safety bollards for building or sidewalk protection. This is kind of what they look like. There's different options for going underground. You can have a flatter option that avoids underground utilities, but these are designed. There's different levels that you can install. There's testing to stop vehicles of a certain size and speed. So we figure about $5,000 for the total install cost. Recent example is right on Pinckney Street. This is the new hotel, Embassy Suites. They installed these types of bollards for pedestrian safety in their building front. And then The example I always think of is Las Vegas. Las Vegas has miles of bollards. They space them at 5 feet. So there are literally thousands of bollards that are there to protect pedestrians from traffic. Washington, D.C. also has bollards, a little bit more decorative style. But same thing, they also have them spaced at 5 feet on, not as much as, I don't think as much as Las Vegas, but just on select streets, they have these. So what could they look like on Williamson Street? We could look at installing bollards at the intersections because these are the most vulnerable locations. I guess looking at commonalities between the building crashes, that is probably one that they occur at intersections. So if you think about the parked vehicles, where mid-block parked vehicles could provide some protection, there are never parked vehicles at these intersections, so they're pretty much always open and vulnerable to vehicles coming off the road, and that's where most crashes happen, is at intersections, and the crashes between vehicles, that the crash occurs at the intersection, then moves off. So that is likely an option. We would still have to look into the exact location of those and everything involved, but they seem pretty flexible that you can pretty much get them wherever you want. So this is at Mother Fools, and just to throw this out there, that the street lights and signal poles don't really provide protection. They're designed to break away, and that is on purpose, and that they need to meet that standard for federal guidelines. Yeah, they're designed to shear off. There's no way to make those as bollards. If we want something to protect or stop vehicles from going off the street, that would have to be installed separately from the existing infrastructure. There's not a way to combine those or something like that. So just a quick cost estimate. So one intersection or one quadrant of one intersection. So like just to protect Mother Fools with 3 bollards would be about $15,000. So you just multiply that by 4 for one intersection, then multiply that by 10 because there are 10 intersections. So that would be the $600,000 would be the total cost for all intersections along Williamson Street. So now more into the removal of the peak hour travel lane. I'm sorry, there's a lot of text here, but yeah, I think we'll just go through it. So we do have a current model in our software, but it's based off of old counts, and some of that we think is probably dummy counts. We couldn't find exactly where they came from, but the big question is the number of left turns, because we're going to have to accommodate left turns if we were to remove the peak hour travel lanes. You can imagine one left turning vehicle could hold up, all through traffic. So the way our model is set up is that we assume 100 feet of left turn lanes at each intersection. And the reason it goes so far back is we have to accommodate pretty much the peak time of the peak amount of left turns at all times, because all it would take is, one instance of that backing up into the through lane where there is no through traffic then. So that would involve removing a lot more parking at the intersections than what is removed right now. So right now during the off-peak times, parking is allowed pretty close to the intersection. So we would be removing that parking permanently at all times at each intersection. So that would affect business parking. It also assumes longer cycle length. So right now the signal cycle length on Williamson Street is pretty quick. Let's see. Yeah, so right now existing is roughly 80-second cycle length. So 50 seconds on Williamson Street, 30 seconds for the side street, we would have to keep the side street at 30 seconds and bump up the Williamson Street green time. So that means more delay on the side street, more delay for pedestrians trying to cross the street. And we kind of know what traffic would look like. It would go from being platoons of traffic right now that get through the intersections to a stretched out line of traffic. So it would be much fewer gaps during the peak hour. It would be more difficult to turn left or cross from an unsignalized intersection. It'd be more difficult at driveways. And we may need permanent park removal on longer sections at higher left turn locations. I think that's probably the biggest question, is the left turn volume at non-intersections, because if we do have a spot like the Willie Street Co-op where there are a lot of left turns, then we need to provide that permanent parking removal to allow through traffic to get around that. This is just showing a lot of some of the queuing data from our models. The arrows are pointing out spots where the queue gets really long. So the top yellow shaded is the morning peak. The bottom green is the PM peak. Just wanted to throw this data out there that this is what our existing model is saying, that there are locations where it looks pretty ugly, but there may be ways around that. And I think we would want to get updated counts to refine this model and make sure it's good. Other considerations, streets. So right now, streets uses the peak hour lane for their collection and for snow plowing and street sweeping. I did discuss with them about this. If we were to move forward with the peak hour lane removal, what we would do is kind of just treat Williamson Street like any other street, where we would just pick a block of time, like a 3-hour window on a Thursday to do one side, and then a 3-hour window to do the other side. And Streets thinks they can make that work. It doesn't sound like it would be a huge hurdle for this, but it is something we have to think about and consider. Fire, we would want to be very careful about the congestion we're creating near the fire station, at least for that block. We always want to make sure that fire trucks can get in and or get out, especially of the fire station. So we would work with them to make sure that we're not creating queues that are backing up across their driveway. And Metro Transit, that's a whole different but related issue, is a potential relocation from Jennifer Street to Williamson Street, because I know this discussion has also included safety on Jennifer Street and using Jennifer Street as a bike route compared to Williamson Street. So if buses were to relocate to Williamson Street, we could do more things for traffic calming on Jennifer Street. So Metro Transit is open to the idea of considering that relocation. Just some history on that. Buses have always been on Jennifer Street. They haven't been on Williamson Street other than the Jennifer Street reconstruction project. So during that time, buses were on Willie Street for the entire length. I think there was some negative feedback about parking removal for businesses, but I think that it goes back to when there were streetcars. I think the streetcars were originally on Jennifer Street, that then Metro has always been there. So until between Willie Street and Baldwin, and then east of Baldwin, buses are on there right now. So what would a test or a study involve? And I say test study because I think the correct way to do this wouldn't be to just throw out a test. We could do that, and just run a test and see how it looks. But I think if we do it without really considering everything, the test is probably likely to fail. I think the way to do it would be to collect data beforehand, refine our models, show exactly what we need at the intersections, try to limit the parking that is removed. Because anytime we have removed parking, we've heard from businesses. If you remember I think it was 2018, 19 maybe, when there was flooding at Tenney Park and Johnson Street was closed permanently for somewhere around a month. I think we removed parking on Williamson Street to provide that extra capacity, and that parking was 24/7 removed, and that put a strain on businesses, and we heard about that, and so I think that's something that we have to be careful about is how this affects businesses, and we would want to have outreach and a public engagement aspect of this with prior to doing a test. We'd want to make sure everything is clear and we're open about what's going on. It would require probably a fair amount of equipment. So we'd have to put in bag the existing signs, look at permanent parking removal at intersections, look at the additional parking restrictions for the streets for their work. We would want to collect travel times, look at the queue lengths. Ideally, we would have cameras to monitor queue lengths and things like that. We don't have any traffic cameras right now on Williamson Street. It would be nice to have those there to keep an eye on that. And then neighborhood cut-through traffic, we would want to make sure that we have the before and during data of that. I think that's something that may occur that we don't want to just dismiss that as a non-issue. So yeah, kind of the different things, updated counts, updated modeling, public engagement, and then data collection during the test. So what would that cost? For all of that, we figure roughly close to $100,000 for a full-blown study. So our current Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, we have 4 corridor studies in that grant that was awarded to us. This was the 2023 grant. Those studies are South Whitney Way, Fair Oaks Avenue, and Winnebago Atwood. Those studies have not begun yet. We're still working on the RFP to select consultants for those. The Regent Street corridor study has begun. That started this summer. That one came in at $245,000. That's a bigger study that involves a full reconstruction. So that's, the Williamson Street study wouldn't be to that level, but it would still, there's still a lot involved in these studies as far as data collection, public outreach, and all that. So I think the point that I want to get across is that there's more to it than you may think of at the surface. As far as it might seem easy, just bag the signs and we can have a study and we'll go from there. But I think we want to do it the right way. We have had a case in the past where we set up a study on Sherman Avenue. This was a long time ago that failed, and we ended up taking it down after a couple of weeks because of so many complaints that came in. So then that gets to the question of when would it occur. So 2025, to do it in 2025, the consultant option is really out. It would have to be internal city staff, and it would come at the expense of other projects. We would have to really prioritize this. not that it would be the only thing that we would work on, but it would be, other thing. We would have to push other things off to prioritize it. During John Nolan Drive, we could do that. Our assumption for during the John Nolan Drive reconstruction is that there is going to be more inbound or westbound traffic on Williamson Street, but there's likely to be less outbound afternoon traffic because of the reduction of capacity on John Nolan Drive, because a lot of that Williamson Street traffic comes from John Nolan Drive. There's just going to be less traffic feeding into Williamson Street. So to do a good study, we would want to make sure that the traffic levels are, pretty close to what they are today. And then we could wait till after John Nolan Drive. The other thing that could be done is, not do a test and rely on modeling alone. The issue with that is the unknowns, like I mentioned before, of left turns, and the unknown of traffic diversion. So we never know, are people just going to say, Williamson Street's too slow, I'm going to use a different route. So we don't know what that is going to look like. So that's what a test is good at, showing us that. And there's always things that come up in a test that we never thought of. So next steps for this meeting, I think we really just want to know, get the commission's thoughts on the urgency of this. Is this something that we want to do right now? Or can we hold off? Our recommendation would be to hold off until we can get some funding allocated to do a proper study. Like I said, a rush study is more likely to fail. It's going to be a strain on our resources. And then the shifting traffic patterns with the reconstruction and overall, right now, East Washington Avenue traffic volumes are much lower than what they have been historically. So East Washington Avenue can take a lot more traffic than what's on it now. Williamson Street is basically back to where it has been historically. It's kind of maxed out at least during the afternoon peak hour, a little bit lower in the morning peak hour. But these patterns have kind of been shifting since COVID and BRT implementation. So it's hard. It's just kind of a difficult time right now that traffic is still shifting a little bit. It feels like things have leveled off, but then as soon as they're leveled off now, then the John Nolan Drive reconstruction starts. So it's kind of a tricky time to do a test of this magnitude. But yeah, I think that was it. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Why don't we go to public comments?
So first we have Mike Tarby of Williamson Street, supports and wishes to speak.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. My name is Mike Tarby. I'm the incoming co-chair for the Marquette Neighborhood Association Transportation and Safety Committee and a member of local transportation advocacy group Strong Towns Madison. Thanks to the commissioners for considering this proposal and to staff for preparing the presentation and sharing some important context. We're here today to ask you all to demonstrate the city's priorities when it comes to transportation. In my mind, there are 4 factors we can choose to focus on: speed, safety, cost, and volume. On Williamson is our goal to move vehicles the fastest, ensure a safe environment for all road users, invest wisely in financially prudent infrastructure projects, or move the greatest number of vehicles. From my understanding of the Vision Zero and Safe Streets initiatives, they rank safety first, cost second, volume third, and speed last. Now, I'm going to focus on the suggestion to close the rush hour lanes because, in my opinion, it's the single most impactful next step that can be taken to improve safety on Willie Street. Let me be clear, this proposal identifies an immediate change that can be made at practically no cost. That the presentation was informative, I'm not sure it made the case for why a study, public input, and temporary left turn lanes are necessary. Regarding the study, this is not a permanent change, so the trial closure can be the study. We're not committing to a multi-million-dollar street reconstruction. We're asking for signs to be covered, towing to be stopped, and maybe a warning sign or 2. All measures which can be quickly and easily reversed. I'd rather have a trial fail than spend $100,000 and months or years waiting while nothing's improved. Regarding public input, the Neighborhood Association has already met with community members over recent months to discuss the issue of Willie Street traffic safety, as well as this proposal specifically, and received such overwhelmingly positive feedback that a letter of support was sent from the organization. Regarding the turn lanes, Willie Street already operates with one lane in each direction 91% of the time, which I'll add is a constraint that emergency response and city operations already accommodate. I understand that the proposal will impact traffic flow, and to a degree, that's the point. We've identified that speed is a significant factor in the safety of a street, and one of our neighbors even performed a speed study with a radar gun, not in a marked police cruiser, and found that average vehicle speeds already exceed the speed limit. I'll also note that traffic volumes are not a given. We don't need to accommodate the current traffic volumes. We're actively choosing to by keeping these lanes open. If Willie Street becomes an unreasonable commute route, commuters will adjust. We need to consider changes to street design, including lane use, to bring all vehicles in alignment with the speed limit to benefit all road users. As someone who lives on the 900 block of Williamson and commutes on the road daily, I'm aware of the impact this will have on residents. Yes, left turn lanes out of driveways will be more difficult, though they're already quite challenging, so folks might be encouraged to make a right instead and loop around the block so they can turn at a signalized intersection. For folks commuting from further north, there are plenty of comparable commute options, especially considering that East Washington Avenue is at roughly 50% vehicle capacity, according to traffic engineering. This proposal is the perfect opportunity for Madison to demonstrate its willingness for temporary yet impactful changes. These sorts of measures are how we learn the best ways to improve our city and push back against the narrative that municipal processes move too slowly or aren't reflective of on-the-ground neighborhood needs. Let's not wait for the John Nolan Drive reconstruction to add variables. I know the commission wants to positively impact the livability and transportation environment for all street users in Madison, and this is a step towards that goal. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, and thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Comments or questions for the registrant? Harold.
Yeah, thanks very much for speaking at the meeting. I think you mentioned that the Neighborhood Association had a lot of conversations with people in the area. Did you also have any conversations with businesses? As I mean, A, the crashes were into businesses, and B, in the presentation, there were some anticipated concerns by businesses. So I'm curious if you can say something about that.
Yeah, we did have some businesses attend the Transportation and Safety Commission or Committee meeting that Tom Moore had attended. I think it was in June, including the owner of Mother Fools, which was the building that was crashed into. I will also note, though, that a lot of the, or at least one of the main concerns that I heard during the presentation was regarding the removal of parking, which for the rush hour lane removal without implementing the temporary left turn lanes, it didn't sound like there would be a significant impact to parking. So that's most of the concerns I've heard from business owners, but yes, there were folks in attendance at those meetings.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harold. Alder Okovich.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks, Mike. You mentioned that somebody had done a speed study on their own. I didn't see that in the public record. Did you email that to the Transportation Commission?
I believe it. Maybe it was referenced in the letter from the Neighborhood Association. I didn't see it emailed to TC.
I believe it was in the materials that we got back in the June 25th meeting. So if you click on the hyperlink in today's item and click on that hyperlink to the June 25th, I believe it was in one of those communications. And I think you might be right, Mike. I think it might have been in the letter from the Neighborhood Association.
Okay, I was looking at the items from the June 25th meeting and I did not see it.
Look,
I do have it in front of me if you have any questions.
I was just wondering if we could get it in the public record.
Yeah, it could be sent.
Yeah, if you could just send it again. Maybe. You can just send it to my email too. I can't find it. It's fine. We can talk about it after the meeting, and it's not a big deal. So.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. No, it's important information. Anybody else have a comment or question for the registrant? I know I read it somewhere. I just don't remember exactly where.
I remember seeing it too. I don't remember where I found it though.
Yeah. There was a lot of material here. So, any other comments or questions for the registrant? Okay. Thanks very much, Mike. Who else do we have, Aiden?
Next, we have Jim Kreft of Fitch Hatchery Road, neither supports nor opposes and wishes to speak.
Go ahead, Jim. Can't hear you, Jim.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, there we go.
Okay. I just wanted to thank the commission and staff for even considering doing the study, and just wanted to also second what Mike Tarby's comments about how trying a basic study using the existing, just not doing an experiment can be reversed. It doesn't cost very much money, and it can really answer some questions that we otherwise wouldn't be able to answer. And we've seen in these types of experiments, since they're not permanent, don't require public input. We can get public input as it happens, right? We've seen this be very successful with, for example, the narrowing of West Wash. And another thing that I just wanted to mention that I didn't really see brought up here is how the nature of Williamson Street has changed, and it's continuing to change. There are huge numbers of people who now live right on Williamson Street that didn't before in the last 10 years, and that is continuing to change. And so I really want to encourage this commission to think about the people building streets for the people who live on them and near them and walk and ride their bikes to get to services on that street over people who are commuting to suburban locations. Those folks can find other options. We know that there are plenty of options, but the folks who are living nearby and want to be able to not have to get in their car don't have any other options other than interacting with Willie Street. So I just encourage to try things, not wait, and we can try, learn, try again so much faster than going through long cycles of studies and public feedback against something that doesn't actually exist yet. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the comments. Does anybody have any question for the registrant? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody coming tonight. Who else do we have, Aiden?
Last is Teresa Emmerling of Jennifer Street, registered as support and available to answer questions, also representing the MNA Traffic and Safety Committee.
Hi there.
Do you have
Can you hear me?
comments? Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, I'm Teresa Emmerling. I live on Jennifer Street, and I was one of the neighborhood members who completed a speed study on Jennifer Street. I think that was the one perhaps that was included in the letter from the neighborhood association. And I obviously support this initiative and really called in today to answer any questions that people had about the speed study. I don't really have any other comments to make today.
Thanks very much for coming. Alder Okovich, did you perhaps have any questions with regard to that?
No, I didn't, but thank you for coming.
Oh, sure, yeah. As long I didn't realize we were going to have the person who actually did the speed study here. So thanks very much for coming and for doing that. Everybody appreciates you spending the time doing that. Anybody else have any comments or questions? Lynn, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering, what is the current speed limit on Willie and on Jennifer? 25?
I don't see Teresa there still. Tom, do you want to catch that? Or do we want to bring Teresa back?
Yeah.
So I didn't need it. I just wanted to ask the question.
Sure. Teresa's there. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, the speed limit was recently reduced on Jennifer Street. It's now 20 miles per hour. And Williamson Street is 25 miles per hour in most areas, I believe.
Okay, great. That's really good news that Jenny is already 20. Thank you.
20 is plenty, they say. Thanks, Teresa. Anybody else have any questions? For the registrant? Maybe put that hand down, if you would, Ariana. And thanks for coming, Teresa. No more questions? Okay, did we have anybody else, Aiden?
No, we do not. That was the last registry.
Okay. So a lot of information from a lot of different places. So comments, questions for Tom? Harold, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 questions. So I'll start with a question about the traffic count data. I know the city or the MPO used to have access to streetlight data, and maybe they rebranded and they're called something else now, where for a while we were able to actually get current data without doing our own counts. And if I remember correctly, that even included data on turn movements. Do we no longer have that?
I think we can still get that. I'm always a little bit it's like the more detail, the finer down, more granular you get, the less reliable streetlight seems to be. So I think we'd be really looking at the peak hour volumes rather than per day volumes. So I would just be I'd be more comfortable using manual counts for that.
Fair enough, but yeah, I mean, maybe it might still be worth at least taking a look and see how it matches up with some other data that you have. Okay. What about the possibility of removing some of the left turns? Is that something you looked into? Because that seems to be a sticking point where if you want to accommodate left turns, you have to create a left turn lane, which then has parking removal, which then has, and so on. So is there the potential to focus the left turns on, say, the signalized intersections?
Right. Yeah, I think, yep, now we're getting into questions that would be part of the study. So I think that would be one of the options, would be concentrating left turns to certain locations. But then you have to consider additional left turns, and can the left turn lane that we provide accommodate that additional during the peak hour? So we know during off peak it's not an issue but it's just that peak hour that we're concerned about. So like I said, all it takes is one cycle or for it to back up and just blow up the whole street. So
right. Do you have a sense? Did you look at left turn crashes on the street in more general terms? Because I mean, I wonder, during peak hour, making that left turn at the end signalized intersections, people probably, either they probably don't do it, or if they do it, it does seem like a risky movement, even though, the traffic flows are asymmetrical, I guess, so maybe it's not as bad. But if you're in the rush hour lane, but I'm wondering if there is also something about those left turn crashes.
We didn't look at that specifically yet, but I think right now there are so many gaps, and like I said, it's more of like a platoon of traffic moving through, and then there's a long gap during the peak hour where going down to one lane, it would be one long stretched out line of vehicles that would really limit the amount of gaps for those left turns. So it would be a lot different than what it is today.
Okay.
But our modeling, the modeling is good at showing that. It shows, what that stretched out traffic would look like, and we can model that. So.
Mm-hmm. Related to that, have any of the other intersections ever made it on the traffic signal priority list? And have you looked at warrants for any of those? I mean, I'm thinking with current volumes, maybe they don't, but that's another thing. Like, I mean, if the delays increase, one public commenter mentioned that a lot more people live on Williamson now, so probably pedestrian volumes have gone up. So I'm curious if any of the other intersections might be getting to a point where signalization might be on the menu.
That's a good question. I don't think they are currently, but right, if we go to one lane, that is going to increase the delay to the side street, which is a factor in considering signalization. So that I would think, that's going to bump them up to get closer to meeting warrant at least. So that would be another thing to consider.
Okay. And then two more. What are the current parking rules on Willie Street?
So inbound or westbound in the morning, it's no parking from 7 a.m. to 8:30. And then outbound or eastbound in the afternoon, it's 4 to 5:30.
And the rest of the day, it's 2 hours or 15 minutes or?
Oh, I think it might be a little bit different depending where you are. I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, I don't see Stephanie on. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going with this is you brought up potential business concerns if we have longer turn lanes and need to remove some spots. I mean, thinking curb management, maybe looking at those limits, maybe at creating delivery drop-off zones, 15-minute spots. When working with business owners, that might be something to just look into. And then the final question that I had, I think you mentioned that your models do not take into account diversion. Did I understand that right?
Right. Yeah. The volumes we're using now are what we think are the existing volumes. We set the model up in 2022. And I think when we were looking at it this year, we were questioning some of the left turn volumes. We weren't sure if those were just assumptions that were made or if those came from an actual count. But right, it is assuming no diversion off of Williamson Street based off the existing volumes.
Okay. And there's no way to model that diversion. I have some recollection, maybe in the context of the hairball intersection where you had these graphs of like 10% more people are going to be on East Wash, 5%.
Yeah, we could reduce the volume just based off of our best guess, but it would just be a guess. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can put in whatever volumes, but it's just so hard to tell what that diversion would actually be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has something that has come up that, I mean, models are good to have. They're a good starting point, but I think especially the diversion piece, I mean, if people get horribly stuck in the street and they have a parallel route, I mean, either on Jennifer, which is probably not what we want, or on East Wash, which is maybe more what we want, then at least some people will be like, sure, I'm going to take the alternative route, which changes a lot of how we're thinking about that. And as you said, I think that's the piece where models only get you so far, and the test, the experiment, the study, whatever we want to call it, gets to that.
Yeah, so we would, and that's why we would want to collect, kind of like a screen line of data to show if there is diversion, because one unintended consequence would be The test is set up for a certain period. We don't hear much, but then after people on parallel streets are dealing with increased traffic for a year, then we start getting complaints that we've got to do something to deal with the extra traffic here. Things like that come up.
Okay, those were all the questions for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harold. Kaylee, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Tom, and thanks everybody. I got a couple of thoughts and a question. I will, I guess, disclose I'm on the board of the Marquette Neighborhood Association, but I was not part of the letter writing process. Though I do support a pilot for removing these lanes, I am concerned about delaying the study for 4 more years till after the reconstruction. I've lived in the neighborhood for 5 years, and we lose a local business pretty much every year because traffic has crashed into it. And our neighborhood suffers when that happens, and can't always afford to reopen a local business or absorb that damage. So the delay concerns me. I would like to see us make Willie a less comfortable street for commuters, and I think an obvious reroute is East Washington. I believe that capacity is still under its pre-COVID level from the last data I saw. There's tons of pedestrians on Willie Street, as the commenter said. Folks are walking shoulder to shoulder around each other, and it will get more crowded given a new apartment building goes up pretty much every year. I am often walking on Willie Street, and the barrier between peds and traffic in the non-rush hour time when there is cars parked feels less scary than when it's during rush hour. I'm weaving through, to get around other peds on the street. It's not ideal. And I did also want to note that we had a letter supporting a pilot removal of the rush hour lanes from at least one Willie Street business as well. But I guess my question is, if we added this to the Winnebago Atwood study to do a more formal study, I guess what would be the timing of that? Do we know?
We don't know right now. We're working on the overall Safe Streets for All federal grant RFPs to get consultants on board. We're starting with the infrastructure projects. So we've got East Washington Avenue and Schrader Road and a few intersection locations. And then we were going to move to the corridor studies. We likely, we could put some timeframes on that to bump up the Winnebago Atwood study. But yeah, we haven't thought about that yet. We were kind of concentrating on the infrastructure projects first. But overall, for the overall federal grant, basically 5 years to get everything done. And I think the completion date for all the studies the latest they can go is 2027. So it would be within the next year or two.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kaylee. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Thanks, Tom, and thanks to the residents who brought the proposal forward. I really appreciate that. Also, full disclosure, this is my neighborhood. I live and work in the Willie and Jennifer Street neighborhood, and I was not part of the letter, though I support a study. So I have a comment, and then I have a question. So as an everyday user, pedestrian user who has a disability, the running joke among my colleagues is today the day that Denise dies. And, it's a little bit morbid, but it's very true, because the challenge of crossing Williamson Street is persistent and it's pervasive. And I feel much safer crossing at much busier bigger streets East Wash now is actually quite simple to cross, and that used to be very scary. West Wash has lots of good crossing. So, many of the streets that I use on a regular basis, I feel safer crossing than I do in my own neighborhood. So some of the behaviors that I witness regularly that haven't been discussed today, particularly when the rush hour lane is open, is car jockeying. I don't know if that's what to call it, but someone is queued in one lane and that car's not going fast enough for the appetite of the car or another car. And so they jump into the open lane and speed up, which makes it really challenging to cross safely, or a car will stop to give me the right of way when I've got the flashing beacon on and other cars are jockeying around them, not seeing that I'm in the crosswalk. So the struggle is real. And so, kind of waiting on a study for, several more years, it is really concerning, especially, there is a very large apartment complex going in on Willie, very large, and the pedestrian traffic is just continues to increase. I'm fascinated that with the comparable between Monroe and Williamson, and just have so many curiosities. I know that there are more T intersections, so that does make a difference, but just what allows that to be so much more of a safe street than Williamson Street. Tom, you mentioned, I think, a few times when you were doing your presentation that you're apprehensive, I think, about doing something without kind of it being a well designed study and then having it fail. So, if we were to do a temporary close of the rush hour traffic lanes to study it without kind of doing all the precursors that you talked about, what would failure look like? How do you know when something like this has failed?
Right. That's a good question. I think it's going to be based off of our observations during the test and the feedback that we receive. So observations would be congestion, queuing, travel times, obviously any crashes. We'd look at the crashes during the test. We would want the test to be of a length of time, long enough that would allow for traffic diversion. So we wouldn't be talking about a couple of weeks. We would like, like a couple months, to get a long enough period to let traffic level out. But, right, we would look at, any sort of diversion. So we would try to capture that. And like I said, I don't know if it's possible, but we would want to get some sort of camera monitoring, to be able to keep an eye on it during the peak hour. There's temporary ways of doing that too, but we would like to kind of watch it each day. And then I think a big thing is going to be what happens on either end, kind of at the hairball intersection, back towards First Street, Atwood, that area. We know there is quite a bit less morning peak hour traffic than afternoon. So I think, this could be looked at as two separate things. I think there's a lot better chance that the morning works out okay than the afternoon, but yeah, that's something we would keep an eye on.
Other comments or questions, Denise? No,
You're on
I'm
mute,
sorry.
Denise.
I wasn't looking. Did you shake your head at me?
I'm sorry, Ann, I did. I did a visual thing. I apologize.
No,
I'm
I was
good.
taking notes and not looking. My fault.
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Alder Okovich, go ahead.
Thank you. Just want to echo what everyone else said. Thanks, Tom, for putting this together. Do agree with what a lot of the other commissioners have said, which is that we should be doing. I wouldn't want to wait 4 years to do a study. I can appreciate how difficult it is for you to try and figure all this out, but like it seems like there is something wrong with Willie Street, and we need to try something. That being said, for the study, I guess 2 questions. One, do those studies come out of the operational budget or the capital budget?
Right. So right now we don't really have anything dedicated for a capital project for this. So if we were to do a study in 2025, it would be all operational, unless we there's the Safe Streets Madison program. I don't know if we could connect this to that or not, but typically this would be like an operational thing.
But if we did it in the, if we had a capital project, we could do it under the capital budget.
Yep.
Okay. And I guess the other thing I would follow up on that is if we could start getting a baseline, I mean, could we start getting some of the infrastructure in, like a camera and money set aside for speed studies, or not speed studies, but traffic counts next year? Could we get that in motion, even if we don't have a full, even if we aren't ready for the whole project by the beginning of next year?
Yeah, right. So we can, we have staff available, I guess but this would be on top of the day-to-day work. So right now we're collecting counts throughout the city. What this would mean is that staff, it's really just a small group that does the counts throughout the city. So we would be taking them off of their daily work to do this separate project. So there would be an impact to the day-to-day work that they're doing. If this, if that's the way that we want to go, but it can be done.
Okay. And then one last question. If we got a camera up, is there not technology to do automated traffic counts?
We haven't done that with cameras. We do have some of our loop detectors that are able to do automatic counts. But yeah, that's something we might be able to set up, but we would have to look further into that. Some intersections are already set up for that. Some aren't set up and would take quite a bit of work that might not be worth it. It might just be easier to collect counts. Are other ways with hose counters and things like that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. Tom, thanks for all this information. I have kind of a weird question about, is there a potential of using both Jenny and Willie as a way to alleviate the pressure on one? Maybe I'm thinking like maybe one intersection directs them towards one light or something could direct them to Jenny. And I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking, is there a chance that there would be a way to distribute on both to alleviate some of that pressure? Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, the feedback that we have always received is that there's too much cut through traffic on Jennifer Street, and that we should try to get that traffic off and back onto Willie Street. And a lot of that is related to the Jennifer Street cul-de-sac cut through connection to Willie Street that is technically only for buses, but there's a lot of illegal right turns from outbound Williamson Street to Jennifer Street. So just generally that's the feedback we get, is that we should be doing more to limit that cut through traffic and diverted traffic on Jennifer Street. So, and part of this, which I kind of just mentioned really briefly, is the Metro Transit bus routes on Jennifer Street. That, is something that should be considered with this, which also, adds in a little bit of a wrinkle in that there's kind of the desire from the neighborhood, at least from the feedback I received, to remove buses from Jennifer Street to put them on Williamson Street to make Jennifer Street a better bike route. But by doing that, that would it probably would, decrease the chance of making the test work okay, because of stop buses and bus stops and the additional parking removal that would require. There's layover points for bus drivers. So it just adds a little bit, or maybe a lot more complication to the test if we were to consider that. But that is something that was brought up at the neighborhood association meeting that I was at, was potentially moving buses to.
The Marquette's neighborhood one. Meaning?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was almost like two discussions at the same time. There was the Williamson Street peak hour discussion, and then there was the bicycle pedestrian safety on Jennifer Street. And because of the buses on Jennifer Street, there's just not much more that we can do there as far as like traffic calming features or providing better visibility at intersections, things like that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Alder O'Brien.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom, for being here this evening. What would the cost or rough cost estimate be for a less gold standard study that you would ideally like to do? There's ideally like the super version of the study that would get all the data and modeling and everything that you would need. What is kind of the cost behind it, a lower study?
Yeah, I mean, we could do it with just the signs and the traffic control. We would still, if it was all internal, the costs are going to be quite a bit lower. But then, right, it just comes at the expense of other projects, other things that staff is working on, because, just to be honest, we're not really looking for work right now. We're everyone's busy, as always. But so it's more of kind of that cost for the internal. But it could be done fairly inexpensive if we were to cut out kind of a lot of the data collection and like a consultant would come in, they would collect data, they would do public engagement, have meetings, it's all that staff time, it's all the time to do all those things that we could do internally, but yeah, at the expense of other things.
You mentioned that there's potential federal grants. Are those grants secure and safe, or are those also potentially going to evaporate due to the current administration?
Yep, they're secure. The 2023 Safe Streets for All grant, we've begun work on those, and those are, those funds have been obligated. So we have those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Haro, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Couple additional thoughts. Maybe following up on this discussion of like what would maybe a scaled down pilot look like, or who should do it. I mean, I think there's a good argument. I hear you, Tom, that I know you all have lots of stuff to work on. I think there's an argument to be made that we will want to do these test studies frequently, so building in-house capacity, and I think you already have the capacity to do it in terms of skills and equipment and all of that. I think it's really just staffing, and so I mean, this is maybe something that the elders can think about when thinking about budgets and all of that, to like enable us to do more of this in the time frame that we want to do it. But I mean, I do think there is potential, since you mentioned the Atwood Winnebago corridor study. I mean, it does kind of seem like a logical extension of that. I mean, there's also Eastwood, which I'm not sure if that's part of the scope of this. So, I mean, if there is some way to connect the two, I mean, either for reasons that you then can use Safe Streets for All money, or just for the matter of the fact that what happens on Willie impacts what happens on Winnebago and Atwood. I mean, I think to me, it seems like there would be a good case to combine the two. I also want to say something, I hear the concern about the John Nolan reconstruction. Obviously, what happens there is going to impact your numbers, will make it more difficult to compare things. I think that's one of those trade-offs where like, it's going to be imperfect. On the other hand, when you have a big project like the John Nolan reconstruction, people change their traffic patterns and might change them permanently. So I think there's also an opportunity here, like you implement something during that construction, people do the diversion and maybe stick with it. So I think we shouldn't rule out, I mean, I work in research, so you want to control your variables, you want to keep everything constant to be able to make like causal statements. So I totally get that. But we're also working in an environment where like, we have to be pragmatic about what we can do. One thing that we haven't talked about yet, I think you made a pretty good case that the building crashes by and large happen at night when there's already parking. So the removal of the traffic of the rush hour travel lane is maybe unlikely to have an impact on that. We can say like once the peak hour travel lane is out, we can do bump outs and whatsoever, but I think it's still a valid question of like what to do about that aspect of the problem. I'm wondering, I mean, the bollard solution, I think you had a pretty good sense of how much that would cost. And this is maybe a similar question that came up previously. I guess that's clearly capital funding, or are there pots of money that I guess there's no TIF or something that can be tapped to fund those bollards? Or you mentioned the hotel downtown. It sounded like they paid for the bollards themselves. Mm-hmm. So is there something to deal with that particular aspect? Or also like, if we put in bollards now and we want to do bump outs, is that going to interfere with what we can do there? And therefore we shouldn't do it right away.
Right. That's something we would want to look more into, is exactly what we can do at intersections as far as bump outs. I think I mentioned it, but I think any bump outs that we put in are going to be smaller than what people would hope for because of turning movements. And then as far as funding for bollards, right, it's right now in Madison, the only bollards we have in the right of way are on the East Washington Avenue, Livingston Street, Center Median Island. We put 4 bollards there because of crashes that had occurred at that median and the heavy pedestrian crossing that has come up since the developments on both sides of East Washington Avenue there. So those are the only ones that we have done as the city in the right of way. So it really probably depends on the scale of what we're doing. If we're just putting in a few bollards at a select location, I think Safe Streets Madison would probably be the way to fund that. If it becomes a bigger, larger scale project, then we're going to have to look into other ways to fund it. But we were thinking about this larger scale bollard project as a Safe Streets for All federal grant application. I think there are examples of other places that have done that, and I think we could make a good case for it here. But yeah, I guess that's the bollard discussion.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you said like I think if we implemented it at all intersections, it would be 600,000, which clearly puts it in territory. Yeah, we gotta get a grant for that. But I do wonder. I mean, just doing it at one or two intersections, because like I'm sure streets or like snow clearing, they're like basically do a little bollard experiment and like see what is our experience. Do pedestrians complain about it? How do we place them? How much do they actually cost when we put them out to bid? Can we install them in the house? And maybe focus on the locations where we actually have crash history, sometimes multiply. So that could maybe be something in addition. Right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks. I did have just a couple questions. Tom, you indicated that if we did do the trial, that you thought like a short-term temporary trial using staff, that cameras would be helpful. Is that something that you would need to get additional cameras, or do you have those already available?
Right. We would likely need additional cameras for that. Right now we have the camera that I showed the screenshot from Blair, John Nolan, and that's the only camera that covers any part of Williamson Street. So we can basically see to Blount. So we can see the back up there, but anything further east we can't see. So the cameras are really nice to be able to get recorded video every day. Otherwise, we're relying on temporary cameras that aren't as great.
And could that be done under Safe Streets Madison, Tom? Getting the additional camera?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's part of the
kind of along the lines of what Harold was talking about. If we want to do more of these, how can we get set up for? I mean, how can we get set up to be able to do this? And just to add on to that, is temporary staffing to help with something like this a possibility? So it could be a Safe Streets Madison project. I think you have some money left there, and I don't know. I think it's coming to TC in a couple meetings. Is that right? We talked about?
Yeah, later this year. Right. It's kind of like it's all, prioritization. What do we put a priority on? There's only so much resources that we have available. So yeah, what do we use it for?
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about these temporary studies as a great way to test something out and see if it works. And it sounds like a very attractive possibility. I just want to make sure that staff, if TC says we want you to do this, that you have not only the staff time, which you said you'd have to juggle other things, and I understand that, but that you have the equipment that you would need as well. Because if you need cameras to do the observations to figure out if it's successful or not, then I'm just trying to figure out if we can use a little bit of Safe Streets Madison money to get those cameras to help accomplish that. Again, Harold, you were talking about less expensive ways for us to try and do more things. And that's kind of what we've been doing with Safe Streets Madison all along, I think. Smaller projects and accomplishing something in lots of places rather than focusing on just all really big projects. So would you have the equipment and the people to do it, do you think, Tom? If we said, yes, we want you to do it?
We would have to go back and look at what we would be realistically able to do yet this year. And we would have to look at the a big part of it is just the schedule. What data can we collect beforehand? Kind of just the schedule and the scale. How much can we do within the amount of time that we have left this year? I think we would want to look into that a little bit in more detail and come back and.
Well, I hear a lot of people saying that based on what I've heard tonight, I've heard a number of people saying they think that we should try something. And I just want to make sure that if that's what we do, that you're able to do it. Pepe, go ahead.
Right.
And we can circle back to that.
Thanks, Anne. And thanks, Tom, for the pretty comprehensive presentation. Before I ask a question, more detailed question, I wanted to ask about when you presented the number of crashes versus the projected number you were showing there. How are other similar streets to Willie Street in Madison scoring? What I'm trying to get with this question is it the whole city in general scoring below those projected numbers, or is it the Willie in particular is a street that is, is a specific case that is under those projected numbers?
This would be my guess, but I would guess that the majority are below. I honestly have not looked into many others. Maybe that's something that we could provide relative to the higher crash intersections. But yeah, I could look, we've got some good crash analysis software that we could look into that real quick.
Okay. Yeah, because what I'm trying to make sense here is, to the point that Harold was just bringing up in his last intervention, and being the main concern here is vehicles crashing in intersections with buildings happening mostly not during the rush hour, right? So we're trying to think here is how can we simply move forward instead of overcomplicating things? With all due respect, of course, I appreciate the idea of making a whole study, but we're seeing the obvious reasons why that's difficult to do right now. And of course, we don't want to push it for years. So coming back to the idea of taking steps towards making this better in the short term, I'm just trying to get some perspective for myself. Is this really a huge pain compared to other places in Madison? Or is it that this street is actually already performing really well? And we just want to make something, we want to show that we're, paying attention to a pain here. I feel really attracted by the idea of the ballards and the impact that those can make in the short term, as opposed to having to do a study that can take so much longer. But I'm not fully sold on it. Kind of thinking out loud here, but also trying to bring the perspective back to, this is a street that is already performing really well. And it's a street that, people look towards to find examples of a street where people want to walk and people go to shops and go, walk most time of day and preferred for shopping. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody have any other questions? So I don't know if you've had an opportunity to think about this at all. I don't know if anybody wants. I see Alder Okovich needs to drop off soon for another commitment. I think we've got 10 right now. So we need 6 for quorum. So for right now, we're good. I don't know if anybody's ready to make a motion. I'm certainly I can't make a motion as chair, but I would say after listening to everything that we've heard, and the past things that we've talked about at Transportation Commission, the idea of doing a short-term experiment or trial, I find attractive, because we can actually test it and see if it helps as much as people think it's going to, rather than waiting and doing the more formal larger study that's going to cost a lot more. I understand that puts a lot of pressure on staff, and I do want to hear if you think it's possible for you to do that. But I've heard a few people say they find that to be an attractive thought. And I'm also interested in the bollards too. And, maybe those could be a Safe Streets Madison project at some of those critical locations and the smaller level. So
As far as a test, I think my recommendation would be for us to go back, put together exactly what that would look like, and a timeline for it, and maybe come back to the next meeting and get your thoughts on that. Under the assumption that we want to do this late summer, early fall time period, and we could provide exactly what that would look like as far as what data we can collect. We could show you, we could go through what model we have, show exactly what the parking removal would look like. And then I think that might be the best way for a next step.
okay, thanks. Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
I move that we take this up in the next meeting with the information brought from Tom. Is that a valid, appropriate motion?
Sure. So we're making a motion to ask staff to come back with a proposal. Would that be a good way to say it, Alder?
Yes. That's what I ask.
Great. Okay. So ask staff to come back with a proposal for this project at the next meeting. Does that sound good, Alder? Yes?
Yes,
Okay.
it sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Denise, is that a second?
Yeah, thanks, Alder, for the motion. I'll second it.
Audio settings.
Okay. Robbie, did you have comments?
I actually just had, I just had a question. Oh,
sure. Let me just ask if you wanted to speak to your motion, and then we'll have discussion about it.
Yeah, I was just gonna I think having that information and having kind of it laid out a little more vigorously would give us the opportunity to have a more robust decision-making process. And so that would be preferable. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Robbie, go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to clarify, are you requesting that staff come back with a proposal for a test? Yes?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we, how about if we rephrase it, ask staff to come back with a proposal for a test? That's a good way to say it. Is that okay, Alder? And Denise, you good with that? Okay. So ask staff to come back with a proposal for a test at the next meeting. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, also from the question about clarification. So I assume it doesn't have to be a single proposal. It could also include options where, like, you know, there's one way to scope it this way, or there's like, is that in the spirit of the motion that there could be alternatives presented?
I assume that because Tom, I think you talked about a number of different things, so I'm assuming that the proposal would have various pieces to it with potentially alternatives.
Yep, we can do that.
Okay, are you suggesting that are you okay with just saying with the proposal for a test at the next meeting without having it say with various alternatives?
I think
no. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, that was.
Oh, if it's to me, I think we can just assume that's what we're going to do. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So that clarification is that's included in the motion. Okay. Other discussion. And before we get off the topic and before we vote on it, we didn't have much else for the August 27th meeting, but would you be able to have it ready by August 27th? Because then we would have a lot of time, if we don't have a lot else on the agenda, to talk about this and go over the various alternatives and review this again. Is that enough? Is that
Yeah. Yep. We'll have
adequate?
it ready for then. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion to ask staff to come back with a proposal for a test at the next meeting, which would be August 27th. Further discussion. A lot of great comments and discussion tonight. A lot of great work, Tom, on everything. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no, abstain, wants a roll call vote. Any of the above, raise your hand, let me know. Okay, that motion's carried. I'm saving all my notes till next time. Thanks so much, Tom.
Yep. Thank you.
And thanks, everybody. That's a good, Alder, that's a good solution to come back and have an opportunity to talk again. So, okay. Just stuck my agenda in with my Willie Jennifer Street stuff. There we go. Okay, so next we have the quarterly traffic safety report. Lieutenant Hannah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to try to share my screen, but Anne, you know how this goes every meeting, so let's all keep our fingers crossed. Can you see it?
Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, hold on. All right. I'm not going to keep you too long tonight. But I do want to highlight a couple things. I mean, hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at the second quarter report for 2025. I'll go right to the fatality crashes. There were 2 in the second quarter. The first one occurred on Monday, May 26th at 5:24 p.m. If you remember from hearing this on the news, this occurred at Northport Drive and Kennedy Road. It was a motor vehicle versus a pedestrian. The synopsis of this crash is that Unit 1, which is the vehicle, was traveling southeast bound, which is, we'll call that inbound towards the city on Northport Drive towards Kennedy Road. He reported to the police that he was driving approximately 37 miles per hour and that he had a green light at that intersection. He said that as he entered that intersection, that the pedestrian ran into the road and started crossing from the median. He said he was unable to stop and struck the pedestrian. The pedestrian, unfortunately, was hit and landed in the left turn lane of the northwest bound lanes of Northport Drive to the Ridgecrest Apartments. If not for video in this case, I will tell you private video that was obtained from one of the apartment buildings This probably would have probably just gone how he stated it occurred, but for video, we were able to determine that he did go through a red light. The pedestrian had already started crossing in the crosswalk with a light. He had the walk signal. He did not run into the street. He attempted to step back to avoid getting hit and was unable to do so. So the video was instrumental in this case in proving that the pedestrian was not at fault, and the driver was. It was a dry, sunny day. There were no environment or road factors to this for this incident. The weather conditions were clear. The driver was driving a 2020 Ford Escape SUV. He did not have any injuries. The suspect is a 26-year-old Hispanic male. Tests were given. He was over the legal BAC. According to the officers, he did appear to be relatively normal, but he did admit to drinking, quote unquote, one drink. And again, through the video, we were able to determine that he was speeding. He went through the red light. And obviously, based on the tests results, he was impaired. Unfortunately, the victim was a 48-year-old Black male who was, as his wife stated on the news, battling cancer. Drugs and alcohol were not suspected, and he was simply attempting to cross Northport Drive, which, as most of you probably know, at that intersection, high speeds are not abnormal. Obviously, people coming up from the Waunakee area, they're usually traveling at a high rate, unfortunately. The second crash occurred on the Beltline. And it appears as though I have forgotten to put the date of this. In synopsis of this crash, Unit 1 is a motorcycle. All vehicles involved were traveling westbound on the Beltline. It appears as though he was maybe cut off by an unidentified vehicle, and in his anger, the motorcycle driver swerved into the next lane and then ended up creating his own crash by striking a vehicle that was in the lane next to him. So he was obviously ejected from the motorcycle and landed after he crashed into the cement barrier. He was pronounced deceased at the hospital. It was also a dry, sunny day. Traffic was backed up due to normal daily congestion. Road weather conditions were clear. All normal stuff. Obviously a motorcycle, and the other vehicle was a four-door sedan with no injuries to those occupants. The suspect, we're calling him, is the deceased male. He's a 21-year-old Hispanic male. He did have a helmet on, full face, shield. His actions of aggressive driving and road rage and failure to keep into his proper lane created the situation, and he did not have a valid driver's license. The vehicle he hit was driven by a 35-year-old white male. No injuries to anyone in that vehicle. He was driving appropriately for the conditions, and he was in his own lane of travel when the motorcycle struck that car. That unfortunately brings the fatalities for this year to 3. However, given what we have looked at, what we've faced for the last few years, this is all in all. Although 0 would be great, I'm glad it's not more. We'll leave it at that. Traffic complaints are pretty much on par as what we usually get for the second quarter, so no surprises there. And then I'm just going to go over a little bit about our traffic grants, because there was an update in the second quarter in February of this year. In first quarter, the DOT decided to reduce our funding due to the current federal administration and the money that they were giving to the state Department of Transportation. And so we were told that we would need to cut our traffic enforcement grants. And that obviously impacted our plans, because when we are awarded grant money, it is awarded to us in October of the previous year. So the grant year is from October for this year, 2024 through, we'll be completing this in October of 25. I'm sorry, September of 25. So obviously speed, seatbelt, bike ped enforcement, all of those grants were cut. The good news was OWI grants were not cut at all, but we did see a significant reduction. Our portion of the grant obviously was $12,500 for each of the speed and seatbelt grant. The ped bike grant was reduced by $40,000. If you remember, that is the grant that MPD solely has. We don't share that one with the county. The county, again, is gracious enough to share their grants, the grants that they get with the city, 50-50. So you'll see the amounts there. And then on June 1st, we were told, guess what? You're going to get the money back for the speed and the seatbelt. So that was obviously brought back to what we had originally planned for, but we ran a few less grants in the second quarter because of this reduction in funding. And so you'll notice that some of our numbers are a little bit lower than what we normally run during the second quarter of our grant year or our year. Ped bike funds were not restored. So I don't know what is with that, but we have not heard on anything on that, and we are going with a reduced budget with those funds. So second quarter deployments, obviously, again, very, very much less than we're normally running, which was disappointing. But we are kind of catching up in the next few months, running a lot of grants to utilize that money. If we don't use it, we lose it. So we try to take that all the way down to zero. And again, with the traffic grant summaries, I just want to point out a couple of them, which actually just blew my mind. 101 miles per hour that resulted in an OWI arrest on the belt line at Whitney Way. That was a low light or a highlight, if you want to look at it that way. 99 and 95 were two of the next highest speeds that were stopped for that grant. I think they did have somebody take off on somebody on one of the officers, so that one of those cars was not stopped. We get a lot of good feedback on some of these grants that we run, where there's schools, but a lot of pedestrian traffic. Neighbors come out to just tell us how grateful they are that the officers are over there addressing some of the issues that they see every single day. So it is nice to hear that the efforts are appreciated. Another grant at Whitney Way at the Beltline, highest speed that night was 104. The next one was 101. This one on Stoughton Road, the highest speed stop, 105 miles per hour. I mean, that is absolutely absurd speeds that we're seeing out here. We're seeing 46 miles per hour on a 25 mile an hour speed limit roadway. Now this is East Washington Avenue, the 900 through 1000 blocks of East Wash outbound. I mean, this is a daily occurrence. Here's another one on Stoughton Road, 84 miles per hour was the highest. So I won't bore you with all of the details, but if you do look at these grants, you will see that the speeds that we're seeing out there are terrible. And again, our officers working these grants usually don't stop anybody who's traveling under 14 or 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. So again, the threshold is high, and we're still seeing things that just make us shake our heads. And there's a lot of work to be done out here. So I'm proud of these grant officers. They do a lot of good work, and hopefully we're slowing some people down. But that is the second quarter summary. I didn't want to take too long because I know the last conversation was long, so I'll leave some time for questions if you all have them at this time.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Hannah. Comments or questions for Lieutenant? Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Lieutenant, second time we're in a meeting today, so I'm kind of going back to a conversation that we had this morning where you made some very good comments about the question related to automated enforcement and whether there should be a threshold. How fast do you have to go? And you mentioned this, like you're usually not stopping people unless they go 15-ish miles over the speed limit. Do you differentiate there based on what the actual speed limit is? So, Beltline where it's 55, is it 15? And then you have a street like, I think you said Johnson, where the speed limit is 25. And I think I would make the argument that going 15 over on a street with a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is very different than going 15 over when the speed limit is already 55. And, there's more you don't have pedestrians on the Beltline generally. And so the fatality risk drastically goes up. So do you have like different thresholds, or is that something that you might consider?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought this up because I'm not sure if anyone who else was in that meeting, if anyone from this group this morning. And it's it's an interesting kind of conundrum, right? Because when I mentioned, and I've mentioned it before in front of this group, is that we don't want to be that police department, right? That pulls people over for a speed that some people find reasonable, some people don't. Maybe it's reasonable, maybe it's not, given the traffic conditions, the amount of pedestrians, crosswalks, all of those things. It's very, people don't like it when they think that we're writing tickets that aren't good tickets. And I don't know that that's the right word, but it's probably the best word that I can think of right now. We can absolutely justify a 15 mile per hour. We could probably even justify less than that. The problem is, folks thinking that the Madison Police Department is maybe, we just want to be, we want people to look at us and know that we're doing things the right way. We don't want to look like we're writing cheap tickets. We don't want these tickets to go in front of the judge and have them wonder why we're doing certain things. Everybody in this group knows that even 5 miles an hour, sometimes less, can be very damaging. But there are a lot of things that have to go into this, right? We don't want to write tickets that are going to make us look like we're picking on anyone, or that we're, I don't even know how to go from that. I think you all know what I'm talking about. I mean, we have to be very careful that we're writing tickets that make sense on a lot of different levels. Whether it's how the police department is perceived, whether it's the fact that it's a dangerous situation that we're trying to control. There are a lot of factors that go through an officer's head when they decide to make a traffic stop. And as much as it would seem very easy that we should be pulling people over for going 5 miles over on East Washington Avenue, it's just probably not the best course of action from a perception standpoint, unless we get a lot of buy-in from everyone that this is the way it's going to be. I mean, if everybody said, yes, the police department should be doing this, that'd be great. But there are a lot of people that think that we shouldn't be. And we have to be cognizant of that, right? We don't want to be a bad police department. We don't want to be ticky-tacky when we're writing our tickets. I don't even know how to best say that, but I think that we're just very careful with what we do, how we operate, our mode of operation, how we take care of our business.
Yeah, I appreciate the thoughtfulness around that. And, I can't speak for other people, but when I have these conversations or that thinking, like I have this chart in front of me, like the likelihood of pedestrians surviving a crash at different speeds and the steep incline as soon as you get to like 30, 35 and 40. And I mean, that's why we're lowering speed limits to 20. And so, I mean, I think from my perspective, you can make a good case that in these areas where there is a lot of pedestrian activity and where we're trying to avoid those crashes, I mean, that's the rationale. We're not giving people tickets to be mean to them or whatever. And I get some people think that. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to keep in mind and I also get like, there's so many people going 10 over, 15 over, so you're probably busy enough pulling over the worst speeders. And there's also good rationale where like often the worst speeders also might be the ones that are impaired. They pose an even bigger risk to people. So I appreciate your thinking on this.
I know. I'm sorry that I stumble over my words. It's just hard to find the right balance sometimes. And you can see by some of these slides that we're not having any trouble finding people going 15 over. I'm looking at a slide right now. There were 32 stops in 4 hours. With the lowest speed, it's a 25 mile, and the lowest speed was 40 that they stopped. That to me is just the biggest story, right? That we are seeing people that are driving so recklessly, with very little thought given to their fellow citizens when they're flying through town. You know, it's East Washington Avenue. That's unacceptable.
No. Is that all you had, Ben Harrell?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Alder O'Brien, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lieutenant, for being here this evening. I guess I'm still always shocked by the 15 miles an hour over. I have a couple of questions. One is, what are the departments that kind of surround Madison? Do you know what their limit, like their threshold, I guess, on pulling people over is? I've heard that State Patrol is 7 miles an hour over. I don't know, like, again, I hear anecdotes. I don't know if it's true or not, but.
Right. Nine you'll be fine, and something. Yeah, there's all these things out there. State Patrol, that's all they do really is traffic. And so that is their main focus, obviously, to do that kind of enforcement. And so the fact that they have a lower threshold is probably not as surprising to all of us. If you go through, Rosendale up on your way to the Green Bay Packer game,
right.
I think 1 over is that guy's threshold.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So depending on where you go, and just actually to go back a little bit about the conversation this morning, is we were talking about automated enforcement, and that the automated enforcement, their threshold was 15. And so it kind of falls in line with what we're seeing as far as what folks who are coming up with these laws and these programs and this new technology are kind of thinking too, that is reasonable to them, or probably won't be considered unreasonable by people who are being pulled over. So 15 is just what we go with. We'd be pulling a lot of people over if it was less than that. I mean, honestly, we just don't have the time for that. So we try to focus on the most egregious, and as you can see, there's no shortage of that. The other thing too, when our officers pull somebody over for 15 over, and I think I've mentioned this before, some of you are maybe new to the group and don't know this, but a lot of times we'll pull you over because you're going 15 miles and over, but we'll write you the lower ticket, because we're actually we're not trying to jam you up. We're trying to show you that, we're pulling you over because you're driving really fast. We're having a conversation about why your driving behavior is dangerous. And then we're not jamming you up. We're actually writing you a ticket that is maybe less points and less of a fine. So there's still consequences, but it's not like horrible. We try to make it an experience where it's more of an educational thing and not just like, we're not out there trying to make money, like a lot of people think we do. We don't have quotas. That's illegal. That you'll never hear that with the Madison Police Department. So again, these are all the things that we have to think about when we're pulling people over. How we justify what we do, why we do what we do. But yeah, it's hard to know what some of the other cities are doing. So smaller towns have a lot more time to do traffic too. And that's the other thing we have to take into consideration.
I guess you just kind of start getting at, I guess, what my next question is like, how does Madison compare? Obviously, we have our own unique traffic patterns and whatnot, but do y'all have a sense of kind of how we compare to fellow cities, whether it's in the state or kind of across the country?
I don't. And I would probably say that most of our officers are not pulling anybody over for less than 11. I mean, 11 to 15 is probably the standard. And I don't know what the smaller.
I more mean like in terms of the like amount of speeding that Madison has, not necessarily that we're pulling people over at.
Yeah, I wish we had more traffic people, to be honest. We'd be very busy, but it's just hard to know for sure. Okay. I don't have a good answer to that. You always stump me, Alder O'Brien. Yeah. I like that.
Good. I'll keep her on the hard balls. Thank you.
Anyone else with a question?
I would just like to point out, along the lines of what you were talking about, Harold, as we lower speed limits, which we've been doing around the city, and now we're doing 20 is plenty. So if we have this general 15-mile-an-hour limit, if the speed limit used to be 25 and now it's 20, we'd be stopping people at lower speeds and keeping people safer. So I think it's been really good that over the past few years, a lot of the Vision Zero stuff that we did initially was lowering speed limits to try and get that message across to people. So I'm glad to see the implementation of 20 is plenty, because that's going to, help bring those speed limits down in many of our streets across the city. So
Yeah, and actually, those are like the residential streets primarily. And to just remind people, we have to use the money that the county shares with us. We have to do shared roadways, and unfortunately, the speed limits on our shared roadways are not necessarily the ones we're lowering the speed limits on. So
sure, we did a few years ago, I think, like on East Washington and some of the other streets.
Yes, but not to 20.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, different topic, and I don't expect you to have the answer to that, but one of the fatalities that you mentioned today was a motorcycle crash. I had the unfortunate experience of witnessing a fatal motorcycle crash just last week in Fitchburg. And this morning, the topic of motorcycle crashes in Milwaukee came up. Do you have any sense, is that something that we're seeing more of here in Madison?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, last summer, there were a lot of motorcycle crashes. It's a lot of power, right, on two wheels. And most of the people who are riding their motorcycles in manners that they shouldn't be are, young adult males who probably aren't really thinking fully. Unfortunately, we see a lot of young men on very fast motorcycles who end up losing control. We are seeing more of it. It's just very unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that this might be something. I mean, maybe this, given the conversation this morning, this is maybe already on the radar of the Vision Zero team. I don't think we spelled that out specifically, that motorcycles as a vulnerable user group. I mean, they're included there, but if the numbers really are going in the wrong direction, where generally things seem to be going in the right direction in Madison, that might be something to pay some more attention to. So, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you spent any time on a Friday or Saturday night on the Ave, listening to everybody just, speed up and down the road. I mean, I live off of Highway 151 in Sun Prairie, and I can hear them on 151, and I know how fast they're going. And part of me just waits to hear the crash. I mean, they're flying. And 151 and East Washington Avenue, straight roadway. It's, people have been cruising the Ave since cars were brought to Madison, and it's just scary.
So Tom Moore, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know we have some crash data that we're going to be seeing here sometime within the next few meetings. And if I remember the old reports, there were reports about motorcycle crashes. So Harold, it might be interesting to take a look at that. If I assume there'll be some motorcycle detail in the crash reports. Would that be right, Tom?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, so that would be something interesting to follow up on, Harold, when we see that data. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions for Lieutenant Hannah? And I think of you every time when somebody tries to take me out in the crosswalk across Moreland Road. And I think as I safely finally get to the other side, that Lieutenant Hannah would say, when I complain, "Did you get the license plate number of that car?" And I would say, "No, I was trying to save my life. I did not get the license plate number of that car." And
most important thing, save your life.
Yeah, for sure. My life and my dog's life. Yeah.
Yes.
Any other comments? I could tell you the color of the car, but not the license plate. Robbie, go ahead.
Actually, since you brought up the question of getting a license plate. The city used to have like a program where if you got the car description, license plate, location, and complaint, and possibly driver description, they would actually send a letter to the owner of the car just saying, by the way, somebody observed you being bad. If this wasn't you, please talk to the person who was driving the car.
Yes, that is true.
Maybe your son or daughter or a brother-in-law or something like that. Do they still do that? I mean, what is the point of getting the license plate?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question because we actually do write some owner liability tickets. That's the part where it has to be a violation where you can write an owner liability. So, for example, the school bus drivers in the area and crossing guards will get all of that information, and I can issue a citation for owner liability for violating a bus red signal and disobeying crosswalk ordinances. So a lot of that is dependent on what we can write and what we can't write. Owner liability is a great thing, right? I mean, I have a lot of people call my office and be like, hey, I got a ticket, but I'm going to tell you right now, my wife was the one driving the car, or my kid's nanny, I heard that the other day, was driving the car. And then we reissue the ticket to the driver. But again, there's only a few violations that you can do owner liability. So if we can't do that, you get a letter.
Okay, so that was my question. This was not issuing a ticket, but it was sending a letter to the owner of the car.
Right. Because not everything is owner liability, not every violation. So if we can't issue an owner liability citation, then you get a letter saying, hey, maybe it was you, maybe it was someone else, but this is what your car was observed doing. And even though we can't write you a ticket, we're kind of putting you on blast a little bit that this isn't okay.
Right. So they still do that. That was my question.
Yeah, we still have that letter. We had to stop for a second because, like I told you earlier, I think in a couple meetings ago, we lost our traffic steno, and we just got someone back now. So we're trying to work through some of the new processes and get that going again.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I was thinking about that program the other day because I know that former Alder Ken Golden actually, I think, started that. And then when I was on the council, they tried to stop it, tried to take it out of the budget. And he and I both said, no, you know, this is a useful program because again, you know, maybe it's, hey, we're watching, that's part of it. And part of it is maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was somebody that you didn't know was speeding or going through red lights or, you know, not slowing down for kids crossing to school. And maybe you should talk to the person who was driving. And again, I always imagine that it was somebody's kid and, you know, the conversation at dinner would be much more severe than the ticket that was issued.
Absolutely. No doubt.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, good to know. Other comments or questions for the lieutenant? Okay, thanks very much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a lot of great information as usual.
Well, and as always, if anyone needs anything, please reach out and give me a holler. I'm more than happy to find answers for you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Yeah, next we have item 6, which is the crossover reports from other boards, committees, and commissions. Does anybody have anything to report this evening? I'm seeing no hands. Okay. I don't have any announcements from the chair tonight. So I'm just going to move on to future agenda items. We weren't really tracking anything for August 27th, but now we have a proposal for a test related to traffic safety concerns on Williamson Street and Jennifer Street. And so we'll maybe see if we can find another couple things to go along with it. Harold.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering about in previous years, since the city budget process is in full swing, and I think in previous years we got the DOT related, budget outlook. I saw that Metro has like a $4 million deficit, and so is that something that is somewhere on the work plan or the agenda for a future meeting?
Yes, it's in our work plan, and in the past, Tom, Christoph isn't on the, he's traveling, so he wasn't able to be here tonight. Tom wanted to do it around the time when it was presented to the finance committee, I think, and so the operating would come first, and then capital would come first, and then the operating later. So I'll take a look at the timing online and bring that up at our next agenda meeting in terms of when we might be able to do that. So yeah, I'll look into that, Harold, in terms of seeing when we can look at the capital budget and the operating budget.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody have any other items? At the September meeting, I believe Alder Okovich is going to refer an item relating to improving street tree protection in Madison, in terms of how that might impact complete green streets and our work here on TC, because we deal with trees a lot. So that would likely come to us on September 10th. I know it's coming to Board of Public Works too, Harold. But we also have 3 projects, Midvale Boulevard, South High Point Road, and MacArthur Road, MacArthur Court, Larson Court, and Sycamore Avenue. And then our TC meeting schedule. Those are all scheduled for September 10th. And we got a bunch scheduled there's only one meeting in September, and we already have a number of things for October. So I don't know, see if we can maybe bring something forward to August 27th and sort of balance that out a little bit. Anybody have any other items for, I'm still tracking what you can see in Legistar that are items that have been recommended by Transportation Commission members, and we keep working away at those as well. Anybody have anything else? Okay, thanks. Then we need a motion to adjourn. Harold.
Move to adjourn.
Alder Martinez Rutherford.
Second.
Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. And thanks, everybody. Great discussions again this evening. See you next time.